They called him a coward because he was the only Navy SEAL who came home alive. But no one knew his 6 teammates had ordered the youngest man to escape and call for rescue.
Let's move.
When help finally
Exit
arrived,
now.
every member of the team was dead, and 18 minutes had vanished from the official report. For 9 years, Micah carried their final messages, their family's anger, and a medal he believed he did not deserve. Then Sable, his fallen commander's Belgian Malinois K9, unlocked the evidence someone had tried to bury. What the loyal war dog revealed would expose a hidden order, a deadly betrayal, and the real reason Micah was chosen to survive. Where are you watching from, and what would you have done? Please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and create more powerful stories. The first sign that Operation Silent Ember was wrong came before the shooting started. Lieutenant Micah Rowan noticed it while kneeling beside a cracked concrete wall high in the mountains, with freezing dust blowing through the abandoned relay station and blood running down the inside of his left trouser leg. At 31, Micah was the youngest man on the 7-member U.S. Navy SEAL team and the least experienced in sustained combat. He had an angular, rugged face, a sharp jawline, clean-shaven skin, and cold blue-gray eyes that often made strangers mistake discipline for emotional distance. His dark brown hair was cut in a neat modern undercut, tight at the faded sides and short and textured on top. Beneath his complete green digital camouflage uniform, his athletic body had been trained to withstand pain, exhaustion, and fear, but nothing in training had prepared him to watch the men he loved decide which one of them would be allowed to survive. A jagged fragment of metal had torn into his left thigh less than 10 minutes earlier. Every pulse sent a hot pressure through the wound. When he tried to shift his weight, his vision narrowed and blackened at the edges. "Stop moving," Marcus Bell ordered, tightening the field dressing. Marcus was the team medic, a 35-year-old African-American man with broad shoulders, a clean-shaven face, closely cropped black hair, and deep brown eyes that remained warm even when everything around him was falling apart. 3 weeks earlier, his wife Claire had given birth to their first child, a daughter he had only seen in photographs. He carried one of those pictures inside his uniform, sealed in plastic beside a pair of tiny white socks. "The bleeding is slowed," Marcus said, "but if you tear this open again, you won't make it 50 yards. Gunfire struck the outer wall, sending concrete chips across the floor. Team leader Owen Hart looked toward the blocked southern passage. Owen was 43, tall and powerfully built, with a square weathered face, a broad jaw, steel gray eyes, short dark brown hair touched with silver at the temples, and a closely trimmed stubble beard. He had led men through flooded tunnels, burning compounds, and mountain ambushes without once raising his voice unnecessarily. To Micah, he was more than a commanding officer. He was the older brother Micah had never had. Although Owen expressed affection through harder training, blunt correction, and the occasional quiet cup of coffee left beside Micah's gear before dawn. "Report," Owen said. Luis Navarro leaned away from the shattered window. The 37-year-old scout had a rectangular face, sun-browned skin, dark watchful eyes, short black hair, and an evenly trimmed beard. His calm came from years of being responsible for more than himself. Back home, his widowed younger sister Sophia and her 8-year-old son Mateo depended on him as their only stable provider. "At least 12 on the western slope," Luis said. "More moving below the road. They knew where we would fall back." Jonah Pike, the team's explosive specialist, checked the narrow service corridor behind them. Jonah was 40, lean and sinewy, with high cheekbones, pale green eyes, very short dark blonde hair, and a neat mustache and goatee. He was a careful man who covered loneliness with dry humor. His elderly mother Ruth suffered from memory loss and still sometimes prepared dinner for the teenage son she believed would soon return from school. "South route is gone," Jonah said. "East stairwell is wired. Whoever planned this didn't improvise." Danny Keene sat beneath a damaged communications panel, working with exposed wires. He was 38, with a long, friendly face, bright brown eyes, chestnut hair cut short but always slightly untidy on top, and a close, well-kept beard. Danny joked whenever fear grew too heavy because he had spent much of his childhood learning how to make his older sister smile after their parents died. Her son Noah was 11 now, and Danny treated the boy like his own. "Primary radio is dead," Danny said. "Backup might transmit outside the jamming field. Ridge north-northwest, maybe 2 miles." Peter Shaw looked at Micah. Peter was 34, tall and lean, with a narrow, pale face, a defined jaw, gray-green eyes, short, light brown hair, and no beard. He had grown up moving through foster homes and rarely spoke about the years before joining the Navy. The team was the only family he claimed, and Micah was the first person Peter had ever openly called his younger brother. "He can't walk 2 miles, Peter said. "He doesn't have to walk," Owen replied. Micah understood before anyone explained. "No." Owen did not look at him. "Danny, prepare the emergency transmitter." "No," Micah repeated, louder. "Luis can move faster. Peter can carry more. Send someone else." Another burst of fire struck the room. Owen waited for the noise to end. "The rest of us are holding this position." Micah stared at him. "Then I'm holding it too." Marcus finished tying the dressing and sat back on his heels. His expression told Micah the truth before his words did. "Your leg won't last." "Then I fight from the floor." Peter moved closer. "And when we're all dead, who tells command the coordinates were changed?" Micah looked from one face to another. No one seemed surprised. They had already discussed it without him. They had already chosen. "You decided this?" Micah asked. Danny gave him a tired half-smile. "You're outvoted, kid." "I'm not a kid." "Then stop arguing like one." Micah's anger rose because anger was easier than fear. "You think I'm going to crawl away while all of you stay here?" Luis removed a braided bracelet from his wrist. Mateo had made it from green and black cord. Luis pushed it into Micah's hand. "You're going to give this to my nephew." "Give it to him yourself." "I would prefer that." Marcus took the tiny white socks from inside his uniform and placed them beside the bracelet. His fingers lingered over them. "My daughter's name is Lily. Tell her I carried these. Tell her I saw her picture." Micah shook his head. "Stop." Jonah pressed an old silver coin into his palm. "My mother believes this keeps me safe. Don't tell her it failed." Peter removed his spare identification tag. "Don't let them write that I had no family." Danny strapped the damaged transmitter across Micah's chest. "And you still owe me $40. Micah tried to push the equipment away, but Owen caught his wrist. The team leader's grip was firm, not cruel. "Listen to me. The jammer weakens beyond the ridge. You transmit the corrected location and bring help back. By the time I reach it," Micah stopped because the rest of the sentence could not be spoken. "By the time he reached it, they might all be dead." Owen's steel-gray eyes softened for only a moment. "One of us has to carry the truth out. It will be you." "Because I'm the least experienced?" Micah asked. The question escaped before he could stop it. Owen's jaw tightened. "Because you still remember, there is a life beyond the mission. I don't want a life bought with yours. You don't get to choose the price." Owen pulled a small metal key fragment from an inner pocket and closed Micah's fingers around it. "Keep this." "What does it open?" "Something I should have opened before we came here." Before Micah could ask more, Danny raised one hand. "Movement. They're pushing the lower entrance." Owen turned toward the rear drainage passage, a narrow channel barely wide enough for a man to crawl through. "Time." Micah tried to stand. His left leg collapsed immediately. Peter and Marcus caught him. Humiliation burned hotter than the wound. "I'm not leaving," Micah said. Owen stepped close enough that their foreheads nearly touched. "You think dying with us would be loyalty. It wouldn't. Loyalty is surviving long enough to come back." Micah's eyes filled, but he refused to blink. "Owen." "Lieutenant Rowan, you are ordered to withdraw, transmit our location, and return with rescue forces." Owen's voice became formal. "Final. Do you understand the order?" Micah could not answer. Owen gripped the back of his neck. "Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." The words felt like betrayal in his mouth. Hours earlier, before the team boarded the aircraft, Sable had behaved strangely. The 4-year-old male Belgian Malinois was lean and muscular, with a deep fawn to mahogany coat, a distinct black facial mask, upright ears, and intense dark amber eyes. He wore a tan tactical K9 vest and a plain working dog collar. Normally focused and obedient, Sable had refused Owen's first command to remain beside the kennel. Instead, the dog had walked to Micah, pressed his black muzzle against Micah's chest and released a low, uneasy whine. Owen had crouched beside him, checked the mild inflammation in one paw, and then hidden something inside the medical pouch on Sable's vest. He gave the dog a hand signal Micah had never seen before. Sable immediately placed one paw against the pouch and stared at Micah. At the time, Micah thought Owen was simply reassuring his K9. Now, with the metal key fragment cutting into his palm, Micah understood that Owen had expected the possibility that none of them would return. Peter and Marcus lowered Micah into the drainage channel. Behind him, the team repositioned for the final defense. "Don't come back, because you hear shooting," Jonah warned. "That will mean we're doing our job." Micah dragged himself forward with his elbows. Stone tore through his sleeves. Every movement drove pain into his thigh. Through the radio, the others kept talking, as if they expected to see him at breakfast. Danny complained about the $40. Luis told him Mateo would pretend not to cry. Marcus said Lily had his eyes, no matter what the rest of the team claimed. Peter said, "When you tell the story, don't make me sound noble. I hate noble." Then, the shooting intensified. Luis's voice vanished first. Marcus stopped answering next. Danny's transmission dissolved into static in the middle of a joke. Micah turned around inside the narrow channel, but Owen's voice struck through the radio. "Keep moving. That is an order." Micah crawled until his hands bled. He reached open ground and dragged himself through rock and scrub toward the ridge. Behind him, each explosion sounded like a door closing. At last, Owen returned to the channel. His breathing was heavy. "Micah, we opened part of the recovered file. The extraction coordinates were changed from inside command." Micah pressed the radio closer. "Who changed them?" The authorization came from a burst of gunfire interrupted him. Then Owen spoke again, weaker. "The person responsible isn't out here. You have to find the explosion that followed, erase the rest." Micah reached the top of the ridge at 2:14. He activated the emergency transmitter, gave the corrected coordinates twice, and said 6 men were trapped and still fighting. Then the mountain tilted beneath him, and darkness took him. When he woke, rotor noise filled his skull. He was inside a rescue helicopter, and Chief Warrant Officer Mason Red was flying. Mason was a weathered military pilot with pale blue eyes, short graying hair, a neat gray mustache, and a face marked by years of responsibility. "Turn back," Micah demanded. Mason did not answer immediately. "Turn back. We are going back." "How long was I out?" Mason's hands tightened around the controls. "Too long." They reached the relay station near dawn. Silence waited where gunfire had been. Micah forced himself from the aircraft despite the medics. He found Marcus near the inner wall, Danny beside the ruined communications panel, Luis near the window, Jonah in the service corridor, and Peter beside the drainage entrance as if he had guarded it until the end. Owen sat against the far wall with his empty weapon across his lap. His watch had stopped at 2:29, 15 minutes after Micah's signal. On the concrete beside Owen, 2 letters had been carved with the tip of a knife, N-E. Micah reached toward them, but the damaged wall shifted. Rescue personnel dragged him back as concrete collapsed over the marking. Later, the official photographs showed nothing. The report stated that Micah's distress signal had been received at 2:32. It said the rescue aircraft launched immediately. Micah knew neither statement was true. As he was carried from the station, he saw a tall, narrow-faced civilian with black hair brushed neatly back and cold, dark eyes standing beside an unmarked transport vehicle. The man wore a charcoal field jacket over expensive clothes and spoke quietly with a senior officer while Halcyon Meridian vehicles disappeared down the mountain road. His name, Micah would later learn, was Graham Voss. The official report stated that no contractor personnel had been present. Micah looked once more toward the ruins where 6 men had ordered him to live. For the first time, beneath the grief and shame, another feeling appeared. Someone had known they were still alive. Someone had made the rescue wait. And if Micah could not yet forgive himself for surviving, he could at least discover who had decided the others would not. 9 days after Operation Silent Ember, Lieutenant Micah Rowan stood outside a private casualty assistance room at Naval Medical Center San Diego with 2 aluminum crutches under his arms and 6 final promises pressing against his chest. The surgery had saved his left leg, but the damage to the muscle and nerves was severe. A rigid brace ran from his thigh to his ankle beneath his green service uniform, and every shift of weight sent a deep, grinding pain through the bone. The doctors had told him not to leave the ward. His commanding officer had reminded him that the families had already received official notification through trained casualty assistance officers and that Micah was under no obligation to attend the closed meeting. None of that mattered. He had not brought the 6 men home alive. He could at least place their last possessions into the hands of the people they had loved. Through the closed door, Micah heard a woman crying without restraint, another voice whispering a prayer, and the thin, uncertain sound of a newborn child. His fingers tightened around the crutch handles. He had entered buildings that might have been wired with explosives. He had crossed open ground under fire. Yet the brass handle before him seemed heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. A uniformed casualty officer named Lieutenant Aaron Mills waited beside the door. Mills was a short, broad-shouldered man in his early 30s, with neatly combed sandy hair, a smooth, round face, and careful hazel eyes shaped by the difficult work of delivering news that could never be softened. He spoke quietly, as though loud words might make grief more real. "You can still change your mind, Lieutenant." Micah looked at the sealed envelopes and personal items arranged inside the canvas bag hanging from his shoulder. They asked what happened. "You are not cleared to discuss operational details." "I know. Some of them may blame you." Micah stared at the door. "I know that too." A working dog collar jingled at the far end of the corridor. Sable approached with a Navy handler, moving more slowly than Micah remembered because one front paw was still wrapped from the inflammation that had kept him off the mission. The 4-year-old Belgian Malinois had a lean, powerful frame, a deep fawn to mahogany coat, a sharp black mask, upright ears, and dark amber eyes that seemed to study people rather than merely look at them. He wore his tan tactical vest but carried none of his usual restless energy. When Sable saw Micah, he pulled once against the handler, then stopped beside Micah's injured leg and pressed his muzzle carefully against the brace. Micah lowered one hand to the dog's head. Sable did not demand attention. He simply remained there, warm and steady, as if Owen had trained him for this moment too. Micah finally opened the door. The room had been arranged with 6 family sections, each separated by a few feet that felt like miles. Rear Admiral Conrad Vale had not come. No senior officer involved in the planning had come. Only casualty staff, a chaplain, several relatives, and the one man who had returned. Eleanor Hart sat nearest the front. Owen's mother was 71, small and thin, with a straight-backed posture that grief had not yet managed to break. Her pale face was lined with age, and her silver-white hair fell neatly to her jaw. She wore a light gray knitted sweater over a white blouse and kept her old wedding ring on one hand, though her husband had been dead for years. Owen had been her only child and the last close family she had left. When Micah stopped before her, Eleanor looked first at the brace, then at his face. "Were you with him at the end?" Micah swallowed. "I heard him until the radio went silent." Was he afraid? The easy answer would have been no. It was the answer families were often given because it sounded honorable and kind. But Micah remembered Owen's eyes when the ammunition count came back. Owen had been afraid. He had simply carried the fear without letting it command him. He knew what was happening, Micah said. But the last thing he worried about was not himself. Eleanor's fingers closed around the edge of her chair. "What was it?" Micah's voice weakened. "Me." Something moved across Eleanor's face. Not anger at first, but the terrible effort to understand. "Then why is my son dead? And you are standing here?" Micah had rehearsed the truth in the hospital. "Owen ordered me to leave. The whole team agreed. They chose me." But inside that room, the explanation sounded like a shield he would be placing between himself and a mother's grief. There was no surviving witness. The recorded communications supplied by command did not contain Owen's full order. Micah lowered his eyes. Eleanor mistook his silence for shame, perhaps even confession. She turned her face away before the tears came. Claire Bell sat several chairs down, holding a 3-week-old baby against her chest. Claire was 32, a slender African-American woman with warm brown skin, a soft oval face, deep-set brown eyes swollen from lack of sleep, and natural black curls resting at her shoulders. She wore a cream blouse beneath a navy cardigan, though one side had become damp where the baby's cheek rested. Marcus's daughter, Lily, was wrapped in a white blanket and slept through the room's sorrow with one tiny fist beside her face. Micah removed the pair of white infant socks from the canvas bag. Claire stared at them before taking them. He carried these? Inside his uniform. Did he see her picture? Every day. Enough times to wear down the corners. Micah almost smiled when he remembered Marcus insisting Lily had his eyes, while Danny claimed all newborns looked like angry old men. The memory died before it reached his face. Claire pressed the socks to her lips. You were beside him. Micah heard the change in her voice. Yes. Then why didn't you bring him back? Lily stirred as Claire's breathing broke. Micah wanted to tell her that Marcus had used his last medical supplies on Micah's leg, that Marcus had chosen to remain, that the socks had been placed in Micah's hand like an order of their own. None of those facts could answer a widow asking why her husband would never hold his daughter. I tried to bring help, Micah said. Claire looked at his uniform as if it offended her. But you came back alone. Ruth Pike sat beside a middle-aged niece who held both of her hands. Ruth was 74, with a soft, deeply lined face, pale skin, cloudy blue eyes, and thin white hair pinned loosely at the back. Her memory had been declining for years. Jonah had arranged her meals, medication, and appointments before every deployment. Ruth smiled when Micah approached, a gentle smile untouched by understanding. Are you one of Jonah's school friends? Her niece began to cry. Micah crouched as far as his brace allowed. I served with Jonah. He should be home soon. Ruth glanced toward the door. I made the stew he likes, but he hates it reheated. Micah removed Jonah's worn silver coin and placed it in her palm. Ruth examined it with sudden recognition. He says this keeps him safe. Micah felt something inside him tear. He believed that because you gave it to him. Then give it back when you see him. Her niece covered her mouth. Ruth closed Micah's fingers around the coin again. Tell Jonah not to be late. Micah stood too quickly, pain shooting through his thigh, but he welcomed it. Physical pain was simpler than the knowledge that Ruth might be told her son was dead again tomorrow, and again the day after that, each time losing him as if for the first time. Sable had remained near the door until Micah reached Ruth. Then the Belgian Malinois suddenly lifted his head and crossed the room without a command. He stopped beside an empty chair reserved for Peter Shaw, placed one paw on the seat, and stared at Micah. A low, almost questioning sound came from his throat. Peter had no parents, spouse, siblings, or known relatives. No one had come to receive his belongings. Yet Sable refused to leave the chair. Micah remembered Peter's final words in the drainage tunnel. Don't let them write that I had no family. For one suspended moment, the dog's gesture felt less like training and more like testimony. Sable was marking the place where someone should have been. Micah understood then that Peter's absence would not be allowed to become emptiness. If no one else claimed him, Micah would. Danny Keene's older sister, Rebecca, sat with her 11-year-old son, Noah. Rebecca was a tired-looking woman in her early 40s, with chestnut hair tied behind her neck, a narrow face resembling Danny's, and reddened brown eyes. Noah wore the blue fishing cap Danny had given him the previous summer. The boy's face was still round with childhood, but grief had made his stare unnaturally hard. Micah gave Rebecca Danny's small folding tool, then looked at Noah. Your uncle talked about you constantly. Noah's jaw tightened. He said seals don't leave each other. Micah froze. He was right. Then why did you leave him? The room became silent again. Micah lowered himself onto one knee, despite the brace biting into his leg. Your uncle did not leave anyone. Noah looked directly at him. But you're here. The sentence landed with more force than Sophia Navarro's hand did minutes later. Sophia was 34, with olive-toned skin, long black hair pulled into a loose braid, dark, exhausted eyes, and a strong face worn down by years of responsibility. Her husband had died in a construction accident, leaving Luis as the closest thing her 8-year-old son Mateo had to a father. When Micah offered Luis's braided bracelet, Sophia slapped his hand away. My brother paid our rent. He took Mateo to school. He kept this family together. Her voice rose. And you left him there. A casualty officer stepped forward, but Micah raised one hand. Sophia struck his chest twice with open palms. He did not move. You came back for a medal, she said. Mateo sat behind her, small and solemn, with thick black hair and Luis's dark eyes. The boy had placed an empty chair beside himself. Micah picked up the fallen bracelet and set it carefully on that chair. Mateo watched but said nothing. At last, Lieutenant Mills approached the section reserved for Peter. His effects will be transferred to Navy custody. Micah removed Peter's spare identification tag from the bag. No, Mills hesitated. Lieutenant, without a designated next of kin, he had a family. Who? Micah looked at the empty chair where Sable's paw had rested. We were. The word broke something he had held together since the mountain. His shoulders shook once, and he gripped the crutches so tightly his hands went white. He did not cry loudly. He simply stood before Peter's empty place, breathing like a man trying not to drown. After the meeting, Eleanor found Micah alone in the corridor. Sable sat between them. She held the dog's leather leash and a sealed envelope. Owen left instructions before the mission, she said. If he did not return, Sable was to go with you. Micah stared at her. He knew? I don't know what he knew. Eleanor placed the leash in his hand, but he wrote that the dog would remind you survival was never a crime. Micah opened the envelope later in his hospital room. Owen's handwriting was firm and controlled. Keep Sable close. Do not trust the first summary. Attached to the letter was a note about the medical pouch on Sable's vest. Micah used the metal fragment Owen had given him. It fit a hidden lock perfectly. Inside was a small encrypted storage device and one handwritten instruction. Open only when Sable hears my final command. Micah reported the device to the officer assigned to debrief him. The officer demanded immediate custody. Micah refused until an independent witness could document the transfer. That night, he woke to the sound of a drawer sliding shut. His hospital room was dark. The locker beside his bed stood open, and the envelope from Owen lay on the floor. Sable was no longer sleeping beside the chair. The Belgian Malinois stood rigid in the doorway, ears forward, body between Micah and the unlit corridor. A deep growl vibrated in his chest. Somewhere beyond the reach of the room's light, footsteps moved away. Someone had come for Owen's message. And whoever it was already knew Micah had survived with more than scars. The morning after someone searched Lieutenant Micah Rowan's hospital room, the Navy treated the incident as a misunderstanding. A security officer suggested a nurse might have opened the wrong locker. Another claimed the footsteps Sable heard could have belonged to a maintenance worker. No one explained why Owen Hart's envelope had been removed from beneath Micah's folded uniform or why the encrypted device had been turned over inside the medical pouch. Micah stopped asking after the third vague answer. He understood enough to know that whoever entered the room had not expected a Belgian Malinois to be sleeping beside his bed. From then on, the device remained taped beneath the rigid brace on Micah's injured leg. The pressure hurt, but pain was safer than trusting another locked drawer. 3 weeks later, Micah stood in the preparation room behind the Naval Special Warfare Memorial Hall, wearing the complete green digital camouflage uniform that had once made him feel like part of something larger than himself. The matching blouse and trousers were fitted carefully around the healing wound. A plain black belt circled his waist, and polished black combat boots replaced the medical slippers he had worn for weeks. He had refused a wheelchair and left his crutches backstage, choosing instead to use a simple black cane. Every step required calculation. If he placed too much weight on the left leg, the muscles seized. If he moved too quickly, the scar pulled as if the metal fragment were still buried inside him. In the mirror, he saw a disciplined young officer with an angular, rugged face, sharp jawline, clean-shaven skin, cold blue-gray eyes, and a neat short undercut with tight faded sides and a textured top. He looked composed. The man inside the uniform felt hollow. Lieutenant Aaron Mills adjusted the order of the ceremony cards on a nearby table. The casualty assistance officer had become quieter since the family meeting, as though he now understood that careful procedure could not contain every form of grief. "You are not required to speak," Mills reminded him. "Rear Admiral Vale will read the citation. You salute, accept the decoration, and return to your seat." Micah looked through the narrow opening in the curtain. 6 flag-draped caskets stood beneath the lights. 2 contained only recovered personal effects because the remains had not been complete enough for burial. "And if I don't accept it, that will become the story." "Maybe it should." Mills turned toward him. "The families are already carrying enough. Do not make them carry a public confrontation today." The words were not unkind, but they landed like another order to remain silent. Sable waited near the rear entrance with Eleanor Hart. The 4-year-old male Belgian Malinois wore his tan tactical K9 vest and plain working dog collar. His deep fawn to mahogany coat caught the light, while the black mask around his muzzle made his dark amber eyes appear even more intense. He stood alert and steady, facing the stage as if Owen might emerge from behind one of the flags. Eleanor rested one small hand between his shoulders. Her gray sweater looked almost silver beneath the hall lights, and grief had deepened the lines around her blue-gray eyes. She had not spoken to Micah since asking why Owen had died while he survived. Yet she had still brought Sable, because Owen's instructions mattered more to her than anger. The audience rose when the honor guard entered. Micah followed from behind, moving with a controlled limp. As he passed Owen's casket, he remembered the team leader leaving coffee beside his equipment before a winter training exercise. At Danny's, he remembered a screwdriver being thrown at him because he had connected a radio lead backward. At Marcus's, he remembered the medic calmly stitching a cut while describing every way Micah might lose the arm if he moved. Jonah's casket brought back an impossible story about a fishing boat and a stolen goat. Luis's reminded him of late-night calls in Spanish to Mateo. Peter's was the hardest. No family section waited beside it. Only an empty chair and a folded card bearing his name. Claire Bell sat with Lily asleep in her arms. The baby wore the white socks Marcus had carried into battle. Ruth Pike looked toward each doorway, perhaps still expecting Jonah. Rebecca Keene held Noah's hand, though the boy's fingers remained stiff. Sofia Navarro sat beside Mateo, who had again left an empty seat between himself and the aisle. Micah felt every gaze, including the ones that avoided him. Rear Admiral Conrad Vale walked to the podium. He was 58, with a square, severe face, a heavy jaw, steel blue eyes, and silver hair cut with exact military precision. Clean-shaven and straight-backed, Vale wore a formal white Navy uniform, decorated with rows of ribbons and polished insignia. His manner was controlled rather than warm. He spoke like a man accustomed to making decisions that other people were required to accept. "Today we honor 6 members of Naval Special Warfare who gave their lives in service," Vale began. He described courage, sacrifice, and duty, without mentioning the altered extraction point, the missing contractor convoy, or the report that moved Micah's distress signal 18 minutes forward. Each omission tightened something in Micah's chest. Vale read the names slowly. Owen Hart, Daniel Keene, Marcus Bell, Jonah Pike, Luis Navarro, Peter Shaw. Then he called Micah forward. Micah rose with the cane in his right hand. The walk to the stage seemed longer than the 2 miles he had crawled through the mountains. Vale held a small case containing the medal. "Lieutenant Rowan," he said for the audience, "despite severe injury, you moved beyond hostile electronic interference, transmitted your team's corrected position, and returned with rescue personnel. Your actions demonstrated exceptional courage under extreme conditions." Applause began. Micah looked down at the families. Noah did not clap. Sophia's hands remained folded. Claire held Lily closer. Eleanor stared at the flag over Owen's casket. Micah heard none of the praise. In his mind, he heard 6 voices fading through static. He remembered the relief that had flooded him when helicopter rotors appeared above the ridge. That single moment of relief had become evidence in the private trial he conducted against himself each night. A better man, he believed, would not have felt grateful to be rescued while the others remained behind. Vale placed the medal in Micah's palm. The medal was cold and unexpectedly heavy. Micah imagined Marcus's unused baby socks, Luis's bracelet, Jonah's coin, Danny's final joke, Peter's spare tag, and Owen's broken sentence compressed inside it. He closed his fingers until the edge bit into the healing cuts on his hand. Vale leaned closer while the applause continued. His public expression did not change. "Accept the recognition, Lieutenant." Micah looked at him. Vale's voice lowered further. "Do not let survivors' guilt turn their sacrifice into an unnecessary investigation." Micah's breath stopped. He had never spoken to Vale about the 2 extraction maps, the missing 18 minutes, or Owen's encrypted device. He had not even formally accused anyone of wrongdoing. "How would an investigation be unnecessary if nothing was wrong?" Micah asked quietly. Vale's steel blue eyes remained steady. Grief searches for patterns. Sometimes there are none. Before Micah could answer, Vale stepped back and saluted. Micah returned the salute because years of discipline moved his body before his mind could resist. The hall applauded again, and for the first time in his career, the sound of approval felt indistinguishable from accusation. As Micah stepped away from Vale, Sable suddenly pulled free of Eleanor's grip. The Belgian Malinois crossed the aisle and stopped at the foot of the stage. He did not bark or charge. Instead, he stared at the medal in Micah's bleeding hand, then shifted his gaze to Vale. His body became rigid. A low growl formed deep in his chest. Vale's face changed for less than a second, not fear, but recognition. He lifted his right hand as if to issue a familiar control signal. Sable's ears moved forward, yet he did not obey. The dog returned his attention to Micah and pressed one paw against the hidden medical pouch on his tan vest. It was the same gesture Owen had taught him before the mission. Micah realized Sable was not reacting to the medal itself. The ceremony, Vale's voice, or a movement from the Admiral had triggered part of an old sequence. Owen had prepared the dog to respond when certain pieces came together. The hall interpreted the interruption as stress. A handler came forward, but Micah raised one hand and Sable settled beside him. Vale continued the ceremony without comment. His composure returned, but Micah noticed he no longer looked directly at the dog. Afterward, as families gathered around the caskets, a man in an olive flight suit waited near a service corridor. Chief Warrant Officer Mason Red was 55 in the present records, but at the time of the memorial he was 46, with a weathered face, pale blue eyes, short graying hair, and a neat mustache that made him look older than he was. Years of flying rescue missions had taught Mason to speak only when necessary, yet guilt now pulled the words from him. "The aircraft was ready before the report says," Mason told Micah. Micah stopped. "How much before?" Mason glanced toward two uniformed security personnel near Vale. "Long enough." "You heard my signal?" Mason's jaw tightened. "At doi, paisprzeche." Micah felt the cane slip slightly in his hand. "The report says 2:32. "I know what it says." Mason looked toward the stage. "I was ordered to hold." "By whom?" One of Vale's security officers turned in their direction. Mason stepped back. "Not here." "When?" "I'll find you." Mason left through the service door before Micah could stop him. That evening, Micah returned to the hospital with Sable. He placed the metal case on the table but could not bring himself to open it. Sable approached, sniffed the velvet lining, then walked directly to Owen's old K9 vest. The dog sat and pressed one paw against the sealed medical pouch. Micah removed the encrypted device and played the partial mission recording through a secure laptop. Static filled the room. Danny's voice appeared briefly, followed by Owen ordering the team to shift positions. Then came a sharp verbal command Micah had heard Owen use with Sable during training. The dog immediately stood, turned once, and placed his paw against a concealed pressure point inside the pouch. A green light appeared on the storage device. The encryption screen unlocked. Micah stared at the files. One contained a map identical to the plan the team had carried. Another showed an extraction point nearly 4 miles north. Both versions had been approved through Vale's command authorization. The later edit had been entered from Commander Helen Cross's planning terminal only hours before deployment. There was also a 4-second audio file. Micah played it. A distorted voice said, "If they identify the convoy, the team cannot be allowed to leave the area." The file ended. Micah replayed it 3 times. The voice could have belonged to a man or woman. It was too damaged to identify. Beneath the audio file sat a record of access attempts made after Owen's death. Someone had already tried to open the device from inside the hospital network. Micah looked toward the dark corridor outside his room. The intruder had not been searching blindly. A soft tap sounded beneath the metal case. Micah lifted the velvet insert and found a folded piece of paper that had not been there when Vale handed him the decoration. The handwriting was hurried. 2:14. "We heard you. They held us on the ground." Mason had hidden the note inside the case during the ceremony. Micah called the flight office, but the duty clerk said Mason Red had received immediate transfer orders that afternoon. His destination was classified. Sable stood beside the open device, ears raised. Micah read the 4-second transcript once more, then looked at the medal lying beside it. For weeks he had believed the decoration proved he had survived because he was weaker than the men who stayed behind. Now it proved something else. The same command that praised his courage had known rescue was delayed. Before leaving the memorial, Mason had managed to whisper one final sentence to a hospital orderly, who delivered it after midnight. "They didn't just make us wait," the message read. "They listened, while every voice on your radio disappeared." 9 years after Operation Silent Ember, Micah Rowan lived in a weathered wooden house outside Laramie, Wyoming, where the wind crossed the open land without meeting anything strong enough to stop it. At 40, Micah still had the same angular, rugged face and sharp jawline he had carried into the mountains, but time had deepened the lines beneath his cold, blue-gray eyes. His dark brown undercut remained neat, though silver now touched both temples. The injury to his left leg had never fully healed. Cold weather stiffened the damaged muscle, and long nights without sleep made his limp more pronounced. He no longer wore his Navy uniform. Most days he dressed in a faded charcoal field jacket, a black Henley shirt, dark work trousers, and old combat boots. The medal remained locked in a room at the end of the hall, with Owen's letter, the encrypted files, and the 6 objects his teammates had trusted him to carry home. Sable was 12 now. The Belgian Malinois' deep fawn to mahogany coat had faded slightly around the shoulders, and gray hairs softened the edges of his black facial mask. His upright ears were still alert, and his dark amber eyes had lost none of their focus. But his movements had become more deliberate. He no longer wore the tan tactical vest every day. At home, he wore only a simple working dog collar. When Micah woke from nightmares, Sable would rise from the floor, cross the dark room, and rest his head against Micah's chest until the man remembered where he was. Micah spent his days repairing fences, doing occasional security work, and quietly helping the families of the dead. Claire Bell received anonymous support when medical bills became difficult. Ruth Pike's care facility never learned who paid the balance on her account. Eleanor Hart's roof had been repaired while she visited relatives. Mateo Navarro's first year of college had been covered by a veterans fund that did not officially exist. Micah did not consider these acts penance. Penance implied an ending. His guilt had none. The knock came just after sunset. Sable lifted his head before the sound and moved toward the door without barking. Micah opened it to find a young man standing on the porch with a hard-sided data case beneath one arm. Noah Keene was 20 now. He had grown tall and lean, with the same long face and bright brown eyes as Danny. His chestnut hair was short and carefully kept, and he was clean-shaven, though exhaustion had darkened the skin beneath his eyes. He wore a charcoal technical jacket over a black shirt, black cargo trousers, and worn brown work boots. On his left wrist was Danny's old field watch. Micah recognized the fishing cap before he recognized the man. Noah held it folded in one hand. "You remember me," Noah said. "Yes. You didn't come to the last memorial." "No. You haven't come to any of them." Micah looked past him toward the road. "Why are you here?" Noah lifted the data case. "Because my uncle's radio says you told the truth about one thing." Inside, Noah placed a damaged storage unit on Micah's kitchen table. He explained that he worked as a civilian communications technician supporting archived military systems. While helping migrate old operational files, he found a redundant data block associated with Danny's equipment. The file was marked corrupted, Noah said. It wasn't. It was partially overwritten. Micah remained standing. Noah opened his laptop and displayed a list of timestamps. "Your emergency burst was received at 2:14 and 16 seconds. Micah's eyes fixed on the number. "The official report says 2:32. "I know. Who prepared this?" "My uncle's radio did. Machines don't feel guilty. They just keep time." Noah scrolled lower. At 2:15, a rescue flight was placed on immediate standby. At 2:16, the order changed to hold position. The aircraft did not launch until 2:33. Micah's injured leg began to ache, as if the mountain had returned through the floorboards. "Why did you bring this to me?" Noah closed the laptop halfway. "I still don't know if you abandoned them." Micah absorbed the words without reacting. "But I know somebody heard you," Noah continued. "And somebody made them wait." Sable approached Noah and sniffed the old watch on his wrist. The dog paused. then pressed his muzzle briefly against the metal. Noah's expression shifted. For one moment, the anger left his face, and he looked 11 again. "That was Danny's," Micah said. "I know." Noah pulled his hand away gently. "Find the pilot, the one who heard your signal." Chief Warrant Officer Mason Red had disappeared into retirement in rural Nevada. It took Noah 4 days to trace him through an outdated aviation registry. Micah and Noah found him living in a small single-story house near an abandoned municipal airfield. Mason was 55 now, thinner than Micah remembered. His weathered face had hollowed around the cheeks, his pale blue eyes looked permanently tired, and his short gray hair had receded. The neat gray mustache remained, though it no longer concealed the trembling at the corner of his mouth. A portable oxygen unit stood beside his chair. Years of breathing fuel fumes and desert dust had left him with a serious lung condition. Sable entered first and stopped in front of Mason. The pilot looked down at the dog. "Owen's K9, he whispered. Micah sat opposite him. "You left a note in the metal case." Mason did not deny it. "How did you get access?" Noah asked. "I was assigned to move the citation packet from the operations office to the ceremony coordinator. They wanted someone from the rescue crew represented without allowing me to speak." Mason gave a humorless smile. "I used the only opening I had." "Who transferred you?" "Vale's office approved it, cross-processed it." Micah leaned forward. "Tell me what happened at 2:14. Mason's breathing became shallow. "Your signal came through clean. You repeated the coordinates. You said 6 men were trapped and still fighting. I had the aircraft powered within a minute. Then, the command net ordered us to hold." "Who gave the order?" "The authentication belonged to Rear Admiral Vale's operations chain. Commander Helen Cross transmitted it." Mason looked toward the dark window. "I challenged the order. I proposed a western approach. It would have kept us away from the road and below the ridgeline." "And?" "They said contractor movement had priority, and any aircraft in the area could expose a protected operation." Noah's face hardened. "Contractor movement?" "Halcyon Meridian." The name settled into the room. Micah asked the question he had avoided for 9 years. "Could you hear them?" Mason closed his eyes. "Yes." He described Marcus requesting immediate medical extraction. Danny reported that the team still held the interior room. Owen warned that ammunition was almost gone. "I kept asking permission to launch," Mason said. "Every time I asked, they told me to wait for the convoy to clear." "How long?" "You already know." "No," Micah said. "Say it." Mason looked at him. 18 minutes. Silence followed. Mason crossed the room slowly and removed an old flight manual from a cabinet. Inside was a handwritten location. "I kept a copy of the command audio," he said, "unauthorized. If they found it, I would have lost my career and possibly faced prison." "Why hide it for 9 years?" Noah asked. Mason's face tightened. "Because I was afraid, and because fear becomes easier to call duty the longer you live with it." He pushed the paper toward Micah. "The recording is in a sealed locker at the decommissioned flight facility near Fallon. I'll authorize access." Micah did not take the paper immediately. "What changed?" Mason touched the oxygen tube. "I ran out of years to pretend I still had time." 2 days later, Mason's truck left the road outside Carson City and struck a barrier. He survived, but the police report blamed driver fatigue. A witness mentioned a dark vehicle without visible plates leaving the area, though no camera captured it clearly. Micah and Noah returned to California before anyone could reach the old flight locker. It had already been emptied. Their only remaining lead was Owen's storage cabinet at the former training facility. The cabinet stood in a warehouse, scheduled for demolition. Rows of rusting metal lockers filled the room, each marked with numbers instead of names. Sable moved slowly between them, sniffing at the lower seams. He stopped at one cabinet and scratched twice at the floor. Noah checked the number. This was Hart's. The interior appeared empty except for cleaning supplies and damaged training straps. Sable placed one paw against the rear corner, then looked at Micah. Micah remembered Owen teaching the dog to locate concealed training aids. He removed the lower shelf and found a narrow compartment beneath it. Inside was a black notebook wrapped in waterproof material. Owen's handwriting covered the pages. Satellite images inconsistent with threat estimate. Secondary extraction point added without team acknowledgement. Halcyon convoy removed from final briefing. Team frequency accessed 16 hours before insertion. Cross objected. Objection withdrawn after meeting with Vale. The last intact sentence read, "They want us to see the convoy, but they do not want us to leave with what we see." A metallic click sounded above them. The ventilation system stopped. Then smoke rolled through the ceiling grates. Noah coughed. "Fire alarm?" No alarm sounded. Micah moved toward the main door, but the electronic lock had engaged. The smell of heated plastic struck him. Suddenly, he was back inside the relay station. Concrete dust filled his mouth. Marcus's hands pressed against his leg. Owen shouted from somewhere beyond the smoke. Micah's body stopped responding. He knew he was in a warehouse. He knew 9 years had passed. But knowledge became useless against memory. Sable did not pull toward the exit. The aging Belgian Malinois returned to Micah, pressed his forehead firmly against the man's thigh, then struck the floor 3 times with one paw. It was not a mystical signal. It was an old grounding routine Owen had trained into him for disoriented operators. Contact, repetition, direction. Sable looked toward the maintenance hatch, struck the floor again, and waited. For 9 years, Micah had believed the dog stayed beside him because Owen wanted him protected. In that smoke-filled room, he understood something deeper. Owen had trained Sable not merely to guard Micah's body, but to lead him back when the war trapped his mind. Micah forced air into his lungs. "Maintenance panel," he said. Noah found the hatch behind a shelving unit. Micah used his cane to break the corroded latch. They crawled into a narrow service corridor as smoke thickened behind them. Outside, firefighters arrived minutes later. The official explanation was an electrical fault. Yet the warehouse's camera recorder had been removed before the fire, and the main door lock had received a remote command. Commander Helen Cross arrived before the fire investigator. She was 47, with a narrow, sharply defined face, high cheekbones, brown-gray eyes, and dark brown hair gathered into a precise low bun. She wore a fully buttoned dark Navy service uniform and black low-heeled shoes. Her posture was controlled, but tension held her jaw rigid. Helen had built her career on discipline and analytical precision. Years earlier, she had once challenged a flawed intelligence estimate and watched a superior destroy the career of the analyst who supported her. Since then, she had learned to bury objections beneath procedure. "You should not be here," she said. Micah held Owen's notebook behind his back. "Neither should you. Not this quickly." Helen looked at Sable, then at Noah. "Opening classified storage is a federal offense. So is altering an extraction plan," Noah said. Helen's eyes moved to Danny's watch on his wrist. For the first time, her control weakened. Micah stepped closer. "Why did you transmit the hold order?" "I transmitted an authenticated command." "You heard them." Helen did not answer. "You heard Marcus ask for medical support," Micah continued. "You heard Danny say they were alive." Her face lost a fraction of color. "I did not know the site had been compromised," she said. "That is not the same as saying you did not hear them." Helen looked toward the burning warehouse. "Stop digging, Micah. The people you think you are protecting may not survive what you uncover. 6 of them already didn't." She left without another word. That night, Noah recovered one final packet from Danny's damaged radio. The audio lasted less than 6 seconds. Static cracked through the speakers. Then Danny's exhausted voice emerged. "We are still alive. Whoever is holding rescue is waiting for the convoy to cross." A second voice began behind him, possibly Owen's. The recording ended. Micah stared at the timestamp. 2:24. 10 minutes after his signal. 5 minutes before Owen's watch stopped. For 9 years, Micah had believed he returned too late because his injured body had moved too slowly. Now he knew the truth. He had reached the ridge in time. The rescuers had been ready in time. The men had still been alive. What killed them was not distance, weather, or confusion. It was an order. The recording ended at 2:24, but Danny Keene's exhausted voice remained inside Micah Rowan's house long after the speakers fell silent. "We are still alive. Whoever is holding rescue is waiting for the convoy to cross." Micah sat at the kitchen table with both hands locked around the edge. 9 years earlier, he had believed his injured body had failed the team by taking too long to reach the ridge. Now the timestamps proved he had transmitted in time. The aircraft had been ready. Owen, Danny, Marcus, Luis, Jonah, and Peter had still been alive. That truth should have relieved him. Instead, it gave his guilt a new shape. If rescue had been deliberately held back, then someone had listened to his friends die one by one and called the silence acceptable. Across the table, Noah Keene stared at the old field watch on his wrist. The 20-year-old technician had inherited Danny's long face, bright brown eyes, and chestnut hair, but not his easy humor. Grief had hardened Noah before adulthood, and the question he asked Micah at 11, "Why did you leave him?" had become the foundation beneath almost every choice he made. "We take this to the Inspector General," Noah said. The audio, the metadata, Owen's notebook, Mason's statement, everything. Not before the families hear it from us. Noah looked up sharply. Why? Because once it leaves this room, they lose control of what happens next. They never had control. That doesn't mean we take another choice away from them. Sable lay near the cold fireplace. At 12, the Belgian Malinois moved more slowly than he had in service, but his upright ears still followed every change in tone. Gray had spread around his black facial mask, softening the appearance of his intense amber eyes. When Micah stood, the dog rose without a command. 3 days later, the families gathered in the community room of a small veterans center outside San Diego. Micah had chosen neutral ground rather than a military facility. There were no flags, no armed guards, and no officers controlling what could be said. Only a long wooden table, weak afternoon light, and 6 framed photographs placed along the wall. Eleanor Hart arrived first. Owen's mother was 80 now, more fragile than Micah remembered, with silver white hair cut to her jaw, pale-lined skin, and a thin body held upright by stubbornness rather than strength. She wore the same old wedding ring and carried a wooden cane. Time had not made her softer, but it had stripped away her need for comforting lies. She looked at Micah's limp, then at Sable, and said, "Tell me what they hid." Claire Bell came with her 9-year-old daughter. Claire was 41 now, still slender, with warm brown skin, natural black curls at her shoulders, and deep brown eyes that had learned to conceal exhaustion from her child. Lily had grown into a quiet girl with her father's serious gaze and her mother's oval face. She wore a navy cardigan over a white blouse and held Marcus's photograph against her chest. Claire had spent 9 years teaching Lily that her father died protecting others. The possibility that he had instead been left waiting for rescue threatened the one stable story she had been able to give her daughter. Sofia Navarro entered with Mateo, now 17. Sofia's olive-toned face had sharpened with age, and silver strands appeared in her long black braid. She still carried herself like someone accustomed to holding a family together, with too little money and no room for weakness. Mateo had grown tall, with thick black hair, dark eyes, and the same stillness Luis once carried before taking a difficult shot. He wore Luis's old bracelet wrapped around one hand, but had never placed it on his wrist. Rebecca Keene sat beside Noah. Her chestnut hair was now touched with gray, and her narrow face looked older than her 50 years. She had spent almost a decade watching her son turn grief into technical skill, unable to decide whether the investigation was healing him or keeping him trapped. Ruth Pike could not attend. Her memory had deteriorated, and travel distressed her. Her niece brought a small voice recorder Ruth had kept in a bedroom drawer, saying Jonah mailed it home before deployment but never explained what was on it. No one came for Peter Shaw. Micah placed an empty chair at the end of the table. Claire noticed it. "Is that necessary?" "Yes," Micah said. "He had no family." Micah looked at Peter's photograph. "He had us." Noah connected the speakers and played Danny's transmission. Static filled the room, followed by the words that had changed everything. "We are still alive. Whoever is holding rescue is waiting for the convoy to cross." When the audio ended, Eleanor's fingers tightened around her cane. Claire placed both hands over Lily's ears too late, then drew the girl against her side. Sophia stood so abruptly that her chair scraped backward. "They heard him?" she asked. Micah nodded. "They knew Luis was alive?" "Yes." "And they waited?" "We have evidence the rescue aircraft was held for 18 minutes. Sophia struck the table with her palm. Mateo did not move, but his face emptied of color. Claire shook her head. "No." "Claire." "No." She stood. keeping one hand on Lily's shoulder. "You do not get to bring this into my daughter's life because you need an answer." Micah accepted the words without defending himself. "This is not only about me. It has always been about you," Claire said. "Your guilt, your silence, your need to prove you were not the one who failed them." "The accusation hurt, because part of it was true," Claire continued, her voice breaking. "Lily believes her father died in a mission that mattered. She believes he made a choice. What are you asking me to tell her now? That he called for help and people listened while he died?" Lily looked up at her mother. "Is that what happened?" Claire closed her eyes. Micah wanted to protect the child from the answer, but lies had already done enough damage. "We are still learning what happened," he said carefully. "But your father did everything he could to keep the others alive." "That isn't what she asked," Claire said. Eleanor spoke from the other end of the table. "The truth does not become kinder because we wait." Claire turned toward her. "You have no child left to protect from it." The room went silent. Pain crossed Eleanor's face, but she did not look away. "No, I do not." Claire immediately regretted the words, yet grief did not permit an apology. Sophia looked at Micah. "Why did you send money?" Mateo's eyes shifted toward him. Micah had never expected them to learn. Sophia placed several bank statements on the table. The Veterans Fund that paid Mateo's school expenses. The anonymous repair on my house. It was you. Mateo stood. "Were you trying to buy forgiveness?" "No." "Then why?" "Because Luis asked me to protect your future." "He asked you before he died?" "He gave me your bracelet." Mateo opened his fist and looked at the green and black cord. Micah continued. "I did not expect forgiveness. I still don't." "Then what did you expect?" "Nothing." Mateo's anger faltered because he had prepared for excuses, not an answer without defense. Sable had remained beside Micah until a soft click came from the empty chair reserved for Peter. The aging Belgian Malinois turned, crossed the room, and placed his muzzle against the seat. Then he sat in front of it and stared at the sealed envelope Micah had placed beneath Peter's photograph. Sable raised one paw and touched the chair exactly as he had 9 years earlier at the first family meeting. No one spoke. The dog could not understand death, guilt, or legal evidence, but he remembered places, people, routines, and the absence of a man who had once trained beside him. Micah opened the envelope. Inside was Owen's final family recording. For the first time, Peter's empty chair did not appear abandoned. Sable had marked it again, as if reminding everyone that the dead without relatives still deserved witnesses. Noah played Owen's message. "Eleanor, if we do not come back, do not blame Micah." The team agreed before deployment that if extraction failed, the youngest man would carry the information out. "He will fight the order. Make him understand that obeying us was not cowardice." Micah lowered his head. For 9 years, this was the sentence he had needed. Owen's voice could clear his name. It could answer Noah's childhood accusation, Sophia's anger, Claire's suspicion, and every whisper that called him a deserter. Noah reached for his phone. "We release this now." Micah stopped him. "Why?" Noah demanded. "Because this proves I followed orders. It does not prove why they died. It proves you did not abandon them. If I publish only the part that saves me, then I use their deaths to repair my reputation." Eleanor studied him for a long moment. "Owen was right to choose you." Claire looked away, still unwilling to accept what truth might cost Lily. The recorder Ruth's niece had delivered contained a second surprise. Noah replaced the corroded battery and cleaned the audio. Jonah's voice emerged, calmer than Danny's final transmission, because it had been recorded before the team deployed. "Mom, if this reaches you, I probably did not get to explain. There is something wrong with the convoy attached to the relay site. It is not the cargo that frightens them. It is the list of names inside. If we do not return, check who had access to that list." A door slammed in the hallway. Sable rose instantly, body rigid. The lights went out. Micah heard the rear window break. "Everyone stay down." A figure moved through the dark toward the table, where Owen's recording and Jonah's device lay. Sable intercepted him before Micah reached the doorway. The dog did not maul or chase wildly. He seized the intruder's jacket sleeve and pulled him off balance. Micah used his cane to trap the man's arm, while Noah switched on his phone light. The intruder was Curtis Bale, a 45-year-old former private security operative with a thick, powerful build, a rough, square face, a nose that had been broken more than once, pale brown eyes, and short brown-gray hair. An uneven beard covered his jaw, and a scar crossed the bridge of his nose. Bale wore a dark brown work jacket, gray Henley shirt, black cargo trousers, and heavy leather boots. He had the expression of a man accustomed to treating morality as a condition in a contract. "I wasn't here to hurt anyone," Bale said. "You broke into a room full of grieving families," Noah replied. "I was paid to recover property." "By whom?" Micah asked. Bale looked at Sable's teeth locked into his sleeve. "Graham Voss." Police later found encrypted messages on Bale's phone, a payment routed through a Halcyon Meridian subcontractor, and a list of materials to recover: Owen Hart recording, Jonah Pike recorder, rescue audio, secondary map. There was also a calendar entry showing Graham Voss had met Conrad Vale 48 hours before Operation Silent Ember. The final file was a partial mission directive. Operation Silent Ember had not been created simply to retrieve data from a source. Owen's team had been sent to confirm what the source had stolen from Halcyon's convoy: a list identifying protected informants, covert financial channels, and officers linked to illegal weapons transfers. Once the team saw the convoy and understood what the list contained, they became a danger to everyone protecting the operation. Micah read the final line twice: "Recovery of the team is subordinate to containment of exposure." Noah looked at him. "They went in knowing rescue might be denied." "No," Micah said. "My team didn't know." He looked at Owen's photograph, then at 6 families divided by truths none of them had asked to carry. Someone in the planning room had known, and someone had decided 7 men were expendable before the first shot was fired. The closed hearing began 41 days after Curtis Bale was arrested inside the Veterans Center. By then, investigators had verified that the files recovered from Bale's phone had not been created or altered by Micah Rowan or Noah Keene. Payment records led through 2 subcontractors to Halcyon Meridian. The partial mission directive matched formatting, access codes, and archived routing information used during Operation Silent Ember. Mason Redd's private recording had also been recovered from a backup location he had never mentioned aloud, stored inside a sealed flight navigation case with a handwritten chain of custody. None of the evidence alone proved why 6 men had been left behind. Together, it was enough to force the Navy's Inspector General to reopen the mission. The hearing took place in a secure, windowless chamber beneath a federal military complex in Virginia. Phones, recording devices, and personal computers were prohibited. A long table divided witnesses from a review panel of military attorneys, intelligence officials, and independent investigators. 6 empty chairs stood along the rear wall at Micah's request. Each carried the name of one dead man. Micah wore the same complete green digital camouflage uniform he had worn at the first memorial, properly fitted and fully buttoned, with a plain black belt and black combat boots. At 40, his angular face remained disciplined, but silver marked his short, dark undercut, and exhaustion lived permanently beneath his blue-gray eyes. His left leg had stiffened during the flight, forcing him to carry a black cane. He refused pain medication before testifying because he wanted every word clear. Noah sat beside him in a charcoal technical jacket, black shirt, dark cargo trousers, and brown work boots. At 20, he still looked young among senior officers, but his bright brown eyes no longer lowered when powerful people entered the room. Danny's old field watch remained on his wrist. Sable could not enter the classified hearing chamber. The 12-year-old Belgian Malinois waited with a handler outside, wearing his tan tactical vest and working dog collar. Before Micah went in, the dog pressed his graying black muzzle against Micah's palm and remained there until the tremor in Micah's fingers stopped. The lead investigator was Brigadier General Evelyn Ward, a 54-year-old Marine judge advocate with a tall, spare frame, a long, composed face, medium brown skin, short salt and pepper hair, and dark eyes that rarely revealed whether she believed a witness. Ward had built her career examining friendly fire incidents and command failures. Years earlier, she had lost a younger brother in an aviation accident, initially blamed on pilot error before a maintenance cover-up was uncovered. The experience had made her distrust both emotional accusations and convenient official conclusions. "This hearing is not a criminal trial," Ward said. "It is a factual inquiry into operational planning, rescue delay, subsequent reporting, and possible interference with evidence. Every statement remains subject to referral for prosecution." Graham Voss sat at the opposite table. At 61, the Halcyon Meridian executive remained tall and narrow, with a sharp nose, cold dark eyes, and black hair now heavily streaked with silver and brushed neatly away from his forehead. He wore a charcoal suit, white shirt, and black tie. Clean-shaven and controlled, Voss possessed the polished stillness of a man who had spent decades turning dangerous decisions into administrative language. Commander Helen Cross sat 2 seats away. At 56, she had retained her sharply defined face, high cheekbones, and dark brown hair, though gray now threaded the precise low bun. Her brown-gray eyes appeared exhausted, and the muscles of her jaw moved whenever Operation Silent Ember was mentioned. She wore a dark navy service uniform buttoned to the throat. Helen had spent 9 years telling herself she had transmitted a lawful command rather than made a moral choice. Rear Admiral Conrad Vale entered last. He was 67 now, retired but still imposing, with a square face, heavy jaw, steel blue eyes, and perfectly cut silver hair. He wore a dark civilian suit rather than a uniform, yet the room adjusted around him as though rank still followed his footsteps. Vale's personality had always been built on certainty. He believed hesitation endangered more people than a wrong decision made quickly. Mason testified first. The former pilot entered slowly with portable oxygen beside him. His thin body seemed too fragile for the olive flight suit he had chosen to wear. His pale blue eyes moved immediately toward Micah. Ward asked him to describe the rescue sequence. Mason stated that Micah's distress signal arrived at 2 hours 14 minutes and 16 seconds. His crew had the aircraft ready at 2:15. He requested immediate launch authorization and proposed a western route below the ridgeline. "What response did you receive?" Ward asked. "Hold position pending movement of protected ground assets." "What assets?" "A Halcyon Meridian convoy." Voss leaned toward his attorney but said nothing. Mason continued, "I warned command that the team was actively engaged and requesting extraction. I was told the convoy carried intelligence material whose exposure could endanger protected sources." "Were you advised that the proposed western route threatened the convoy?" "No." "Would it have?" "No." The word passed through the chamber like a blade. Ward played the recovered command audio. Marcus Bell's voice emerged first, strained but controlled, reporting multiple wounded and requesting immediate medical extraction. Danny followed, confirming that the team still held the relay room. Then Owen's voice cut through heavy static. "Rescue. This is Hart. Ammunition critical. We remain operational. Confirm inbound." Mason's younger voice replied that the aircraft was prepared. A woman's voice answered over command. "Rescue remains grounded. Repeat. Remain grounded until protected movement clears the corridor." Ward stopped the audio. "Commander Cross, is that your voice?" Helen looked toward Vale before answering. "Yes." "Did you know the men were alive?" "Yes." "Did you know the western approach avoided the convoy?" Helen hesitated. "I knew it had been proposed." "Why was it denied?" "I transmitted the decision. I did not make it." Vale's expression did not change. Ward turned to him. "Admiral?" Vale folded his hands. The situation was larger than one rescue flight. The convoy carried identities of embedded informants, covert financial routes, and liaison officers. If hostile forces recovered that material, dozens of people and their families could have been killed. Micah listened from the witness table. Vale's explanation was not absurd. That was what made it dangerous. It contained enough truth to hide the choice beneath it. Ward asked, "Why was Hart's team not warned about the convoy?" "Compartmentalization." "Why did the mission briefing understate the hostile presence?" "Intelligence was incomplete." "Why were 2 extraction points entered?" "Operational flexibility." "Why was the later point not transmitted to the team?" Vale paused. "That may have been an administrative failure." Micah's grip tightened around the cane. 18 minutes, 6 men. Administrative failure. Voss testified next. He denied ordering military personnel to delay rescue. "Halcyon Meridian," he claimed, had merely notified command that sensitive materials were moving through the area. Ward displayed Bale's authenticated messages. Recover heart recording. Recover Pike device. Recover rescue archive. No public exposure. Voss studied the screen. Bale acted beyond his authorization. Your financial office paid him. A subcontractor paid him. Under a task number approved by your office. Voss's expression hardened. My responsibility was protecting intelligence assets. Did those assets include evidence of illegal weapons transfers? That characterization is misleading. Did you meet Admiral Vale 48 hours before deployment? I met many officials. Did you request that recovery of the SEAL team be subordinate to containment of the convoy? Voss looked toward Vale. Neither man answered. During a recess, Noah received permission to examine one final damaged audio layer from Owen's storage device. The file had resisted recovery because a high-frequency tone overlapped Owen's voice. Outside the chamber, Sable heard the tone through Noah's secured headset when one ear cup slipped loose. The old Belgian Malinois rose immediately, crossed to Micah, and placed one paw against the medical pouch on his tactical vest, the same response Owen had trained 9 years earlier. Noah froze. The tone was not interference. It was a K9 command marker Owen had deliberately inserted to identify the correct audio channel. Noah filtered around its frequency. A hidden sentence emerged beneath the static. If command offers to clear Micah while sealing the convoy, Micah must refuse. A clean name bought with our silence is another burial. Owen had anticipated not only the mission's failure, but the bargain that might follow. Micah stared through the hearing room glass at the 6 empty chairs. The dead were no longer asking him merely to prove he had obeyed. They were asking what kind of man he would become once innocence was offered at a price. The hearing resumed with Helen Cross, recalled to the table. Ward played the recovered sentence for the panel. Helen's face changed. She looked at Micah. I tried to stop the mission. Vale turned toward her. Commander. No, Helen said. The single word trembled, but she repeated it more firmly. No. She told the panel that Owen had challenged the threat estimate. Helen reviewed satellite images and found the Halcyon convoy had been removed from the final briefing. She filed an objection. Vale summoned her privately and explained that the operation protected a strategic network. If the convoy were exposed, diplomatic relationships and covert sources would collapse. What did you do? Ward asked. I withdrew my objection. Why? Helen looked down at her hands. Years earlier, I challenged a senior intelligence estimate. The analyst who supported me lost his clearance and career. I convinced myself that obedience protected the institution from chaos. And when you heard Hart's team requesting rescue, I told myself Vale had information I did not. After Marcus Bell requested medical extraction, Helen's voice weakened. I still held the aircraft. After Danny Keene confirmed they were alive? Yes. After Hart reported ammunition critical? Helen closed her eyes. Yes. Micah felt no triumph. Watching Helen confess did not restore a single heartbeat. Ward asked, who denied the western route? Helen looked directly at Vale. He did. Vale leaned back. Because any aircraft signature risked drawing hostile attention to the convoy. Mason spoke from the witness row. The route was behind the ridge. No direct line of sight. Minimal electronic exposure. Vale replied, minimal is not zero. Micah was called to testify. He described Owen's order. The crawl to the ridge, the signal, the return, and the stopped watches. He did not dramatize. He did not ask the panel to pity him. Vale's attorney questioned whether survivor's guilt had distorted Micah's memory. It distorted how I judged myself, Micah answered. It did not change the timestamp. Before final statements, Vale requested a private discussion. In a side room, Vale placed a written agreement on the table. The Navy would publicly release Owen's order. Micah would be cleared of abandonment. His record and medal citation would be corrected. The families would receive compensation. In exchange, details involving Halcyon, the convoy and protected sources would remain permanently sealed. This gives the families closure, Vale said. It gives them a version you can survive. It protects living people. And you? Vale's eyes remained cold. History is written by those willing to accept responsibility for impossible decisions. Micah thought of Claire protecting Lily, Eleanor demanding truth, Ruth waiting for Jonah, Mateo holding Luis's bracelet, and Peter's empty chair. For 9 years, Micah had wanted one sentence. He did not abandon them. Now it was available. All he had to do was let the rest remain buried. "If I take back my name by surrendering theirs," Micah said, "then I become part of the 18 minutes." He pushed the agreement back. Helen's full testimony, Mason's audio, Noah's technical analysis, and Bale's financial records produced the panel's preliminary findings. Threat intelligence had been deliberately withheld. Extraction data had been altered without team acknowledgement. Micah's signal arrived at 2:14. Rescue could have launched by 2:15 using the western route. Vale ordered the delay. Helen transmitted and maintained it despite knowing the team remained alive. Voss pressured command to protect the convoy and later funded efforts to recover evidence. The finding did not claim every man would have survived. It stated something more precise and more devastating. Timely launch created a reasonable probability that several could have been recovered alive. Noah then played Owen's last restored recording. "Micah will think we chose him because he was the youngest and least experienced. That is not why. We chose him because he still remembers why we fight to bring people home." Micah lowered his head. The sentence did not erase his guilt. It gave the guilt somewhere to go. At the close of the hearing, General Ward informed him that the Navy intended to hold a public ceremony, restoring his record and honoring the 6 men under corrected findings. Micah looked at the empty chairs. "I will attend on 2 conditions." Ward waited. "Their names are read before mine." "And the second?" "The 18 minutes are entered into the public record, not as confusion, not as equipment failure, as a decision." Ward studied him, then nodded. Outside the chamber, Sable rose when Micah appeared. The old dog leaned into his injured leg, steady and familiar. For 9 years, Micah had tried to prove he had not run away. Now he understood the harder task. He had to stand still long enough for the truth to reach everyone who had been left behind. The Navy did not call the second ceremony an apology. Institutions rarely used words that simple. The official announcement described it as a public correction of the record, a restoration of honor, and a renewed memorial for the 6 members of Owen Hart's team. The findings confirmed that Operation Silent Ember had been launched with incomplete intelligence, that the extraction plan had been changed without proper acknowledgement, and that rescue had been deliberately delayed for 18 minutes. The criminal and administrative investigations involving Conrad Vale, Helen Cross, Graham Voss, and Halcyon Meridian were still continuing. No one had yet been convicted, and several classified details remained sealed to protect people who were still alive. But one fact would no longer be hidden behind the language of technical failure. Micah Rowan had transmitted in time, and the men he left behind had remained alive while rescue was held on the ground. The ceremony took place 9 years after the first memorial, in the same hall where Micah had once accepted a medal that felt like evidence against him. This time, the 6 caskets were replaced by 6 framed portraits and 6 objects recovered from the mission or preserved by their families. Owen's stopped field watch rested beneath his photograph. Danny's damaged communication unit sat beside his. Marcus's medical pouch had been cleaned but not repaired. Jonah's silver coin lay beneath a clear cover. Luis's green and black bracelet rested beside a photograph of him with Mateo. Peter's spare identification tag hung from a simple wooden stand. Micah waited behind the stage in a complete standard-issue green digital camouflage uniform, the matching blouse and trousers properly fitted and fully buttoned. A plain black belt circled his waist, and plain black combat boots supported a stance that still favored his right leg. At 40, his angular, rugged face had grown leaner. Silver touched his neat short undercut at the temples, and the cold blue-gray eyes that once made him appear distant now carried an exhaustion too honest to hide. He held no hat, weapon, or decoration. The medal remained in a small case on a table beside him. Sable stood at his left side wearing the same tan tactical K9 vest Owen had once fastened around him. At 12, the full-grown male Belgian Malinois was older than most working dogs ever remained in service. Gray hairs spread through his distinct black facial mask. His deep fawn-to-mahogany coat had thinned slightly near the shoulders, and stiffness slowed the movement of his lean, muscular body. Yet his upright ears and dark amber eyes remained focused. He faced the stage with a steady, obedient posture, as though waiting for a command that had taken 9 years to complete. General Evelyn Ward met Micah near the curtain. The 54-year-old Marine judge advocate wore a dark, formal uniform that emphasized her tall, spare frame. Her medium brown face remained composed, her short salt and pepper hair neatly shaped, and her dark eyes watchful. She had insisted the public findings use exact language rather than vague statements of regret. "The 18 minutes are included," Ward said, "not described as confusion, not attributed to equipment." "And the names?" "Before yours." Micah nodded. Ward studied him. "You understand this will not feel like justice to everyone. I know. Some families may still blame you. I know that too." The doors opened. Eleanor Hart sat in the first row. At 80, Owen's mother appeared smaller than she had 9 years earlier. Her silver-white hair framed a pale face marked by deep lines, and both hands rested on the top of her wooden cane, but her back remained straight. She had lost the only child she had, then spent nearly a decade living with the belief that his final choice might have been misunderstood. Today she wore Owen's old service pin on her light gray sweater. Claire Bell sat beside her daughter Lily. Claire's warm brown skin and natural black curls had changed little, but strain lived in her deep-set eyes. She had agreed to attend only after Lily asked to hear the corrected findings herself. At 9, Lily was slender and quiet, with her mother's oval face and Marcus's thoughtful dark eyes. She wore a navy cardigan over a white blouse and held the photograph of the father she had never met. Rebecca Keene sat with Noah. Rebecca's chestnut hair had turned partly gray, and years of trying to protect her son from grief had left tired lines around her brown eyes. Noah wore his charcoal technical jacket rather than a uniform. Danny's field watch remained on his left wrist. Sofia Navarro sat beside Mateo. Sofia's olive-toned face was controlled, though anger still lived close beneath the surface. Silver strands ran through her long black braid. Mateo, now 17, had finally fastened Luis's green and black bracelet around his wrist. His thick black hair and dark eyes resembled his uncle's, but his expression remained guarded. Ruth Pike could not understand the ceremony well enough to attend. A nurse from her care facility sat in the audience holding a small photograph of Jonah. Peter still had no biological relatives present. At Micah's request, an empty chair stood beneath his portrait. The honor guard entered. Ward approached the podium but did not begin with Micah. "Owen Hart," she said. Owen's portrait appeared on the large screen behind her. Daniel Keene, Marcus Bell, Jonah Pike, Luis Navarro, Peter Shaw. After every name, the hall remained silent for one full breath. Ward then read the corrected findings. She explained that rescue aircraft were prepared to launch at 2:15, that a viable western route had been available, and that command held the aircraft until 2:33 to allow a protected contractor convoy to clear the region. She did not promise that every man would have survived. She said the evidence established a reasonable probability that some could have been recovered alive. The sentence moved through the families differently. Eleanor closed her eyes. Claire wrapped one arm around Lily. Rebecca lowered her head. Sophia stared at the stage as though anger were the only thing keeping her upright. Mateo's fingers closed around Luis's bracelet. Noah looked at Danny's watch. Micah heard no relief in the room. Truth had not arrived as comfort. It had arrived as weight finally placed on the correct shoulders. Ward called Micah's name last. He walked toward the podium without a cane. The distance was short, but his injured leg trembled before he reached the microphone. Sable moved beside him at the same measured pace. When Micah stopped, the Belgian Malinois stopped. The medal waited in an open case. Micah looked at it, then at the 6 portraits. "I was told this medal represented courage," he began. "For 9 years, I believed it represented the moment I left better men behind." No one moved. "I did not bring them out of that mountain. They brought me out. They gave me the transmitter, their messages, and the order to keep moving. I spent years believing survival meant I had failed them. The truth is harder. Survival was the final responsibility they placed in my hands." Micah lifted the medal from the case. Instead of attaching it to his uniform, he placed it beneath the 6 portraits. "This belongs here." Sable left Micah's side without being called. The old Belgian Malinois walked slowly toward Owen's tan K9 vest, which had been displayed beside the stopped watch. For years, whenever the vest appeared, Sable had pressed a paw against the hidden medical pouch, scratched at its seam, or waited for Owen's command marker. This time, the dog sniffed the pouch once. Then he lowered himself beside the vest, rested his gray-black muzzle across his front paws, and closed his eyes. He did not scratch. He did not search. He did not wait. The action was simple, but everyone who knew the story understood it. Sable had carried Owen's final evidence, guarded Micah through nightmares, found the hidden notebook, and led investigators back to the truth. Now, for the first time, the K9 behaved as though there was nothing left to retrieve. Owen's last order had been completed. Eleanor rose after the ceremony and approached Micah. For a moment, he expected the question she had asked 9 years earlier. Why did my son stay while you returned? Instead, she placed both hands around his. Owen did not save the wrong man, she said. Micah looked down. I don't know if I became the man he expected. You came back for him. It took 9 years, but you came back. Micah offered her Owen's letter. Eleanor pushed it gently toward him. He did not write that for the mother who lost him, she said. He wrote it for the brother he wanted to live. Claire came next with Lily. Claire did not apologize for the accusations she had made after Marcus's death. Micah did not ask her to. Some pain could be understood without being erased. Lily looked at the medical pouch beneath her father's photograph. Was he scared? She asked. Micah knelt carefully so they were level. Yes. Claire's hand tightened on her daughter's shoulder. Micah continued. Courage is not being unafraid. Your father was scared, and he still treated every wounded man before himself. He still talked about you. He still believed someone would bring his message home. What did he say? That he had seen your picture. That he loved you before he ever held you. Lily began to cry without hiding her face. Claire pulled her close, but this time she did not turn away from Micah. Noah waited until the hall had nearly emptied. He removed 2 $20 bills from his wallet. Danny said you owed him $40. Micah accepted the money and examined it. He exaggerated. Noah almost smiled. You made me spend 9 years proving you weren't a coward. I never asked you to. No, you just let me believe it. Micah met his eyes. I thought your anger belonged to you. It did. Noah looked at the empty chair beneath Peter's portrait. It just shouldn't have belonged to you too. Micah handed 1 bill back. Danny would have charged interest, Noah said. He would also have forgotten how much I owed. They laughed once, quietly, and the sound carried more grief than joy. Sophia approached with Matteo, but remained a few feet away. Matteo touched the bracelet on his wrist. I know why you sent the money. Micah said nothing. I'm not ready to forgive everything. You don't have to. Matteo looked surprised. Micah continued. Forgiveness is not another mission someone gets to assign you. Sophia's expression softened only slightly. It was not peace, but it was no longer hatred. At Peter's chair, Micah sat alone for several minutes. Then former members of the wider unit began standing behind him, men who had trained with Peter, eaten beside him, argued with him, and failed to understand how deeply he feared being forgotten. Micah looked at the portrait. You had a family, he said. We were simply late to the chair. Several weeks later, Micah visited Ruth Pike's care facility. Ruth sat beside a window, a small elderly woman with thin white hair, cloudy blue eyes, and a blanket over her knees. She looked at Micah and smiled. Are you Jonah's friend? Yes. Is Jonah coming home? Micah sat beside her. Yes, ma'am. When? Micah looked at the silver coin resting on the table. Today. They all came home today. Ruth relaxed, as though she had finally received permission to stop waiting. The investigation continued after the ceremony. Vale's decisions were referred for further legal review. Helen Cross cooperated with investigators and surrendered her remaining classified records. Halcyon Meridian lost government contracts while financial and criminal inquiries examined Voss's conduct. None of it restored the dead. Micah no longer expected justice to behave like resurrection. Months later, he began volunteering at a veterans recovery center in Wyoming. He did not introduce himself as a hero or counselor. He repaired equipment, drove men to appointments, and sat in hallways with those who could not yet enter therapy rooms. One winter afternoon, a 24-year-old former infantryman named Caleb Mercer sat outside a group session. Caleb was tall but painfully thin, with a narrow, unshaven face, dull green eyes, and dark blonde hair that had grown unevenly over his ears. He wore a worn brown jacket, gray sweatshirt, jeans, and work boots. An explosion overseas had killed 2 members of his squad, while Caleb survived with minor injuries. Since returning home, he spoke to almost no one and treated every kindness as an accusation. Micah sat several feet away without introducing himself. Sable, now moving with visible stiffness, walked slowly between them. The old dog looked at Caleb, then placed his head on the young veteran's knee. Caleb's hands froze. After a long silence, he whispered, "Why me?" Micah understood the question was not about the dog. He looked through the window at the snow gathering beyond the building. "I don't know," he said. But surviving means the answer is not finished yet. Caleb's face folded, and the first tears came. Micah did not tell him to stop. Sable remained where he was, steady beneath the young man's trembling hand. For 9 years, Micah had believed Owen's last mission was to send him back to the mountain with help. He understood now that the mission had never ended there. Owen had sent him back to the living. Micah still woke some nights, hearing distant gunfire. His legs still hurt in the cold. There were families who might never fully forgive him, and decisions no hearing could undo. But he no longer heard his team asking why he had left. He heard Owen's final command as it had truly been given. Keep moving. And for the first time since the mountain, Micah obeyed without shame. Sometimes, a miracle does not arrive as a sudden light from heaven, or an answer that removes every pain. Sometimes, God's miracle is the strength to take one more step when grief tells us to stop. It is the loyal friend who refuses to leave our side, the truth that survives years of silence, or the quiet voice reminding us that our lives still have meaning. Micah believed surviving made him unworthy of the men who had sacrificed themselves for him. But perhaps God did not preserve his life so that he would remain trapped in guilt. Perhaps he was given more time so he could carry their love forward, defend their truth, and help other wounded souls find their way home. In our everyday lives, we may also carry burdens that no one else can see. We may blame ourselves for things we could not control, question why we were spared from certain hardships, or wonder why God allowed us to walk through seasons of loss. We may not receive every answer immediately, but even in silence, God may still be working through the people who stand beside us, the animals who comfort us, the courage that rises after fear, and the small acts of kindness that keep another person from giving up. Never believe that your pain has made your life worthless. The chapter that wounded you does not have to become the ending of your story. You may still be here because someone needs your compassion, your testimony, your forgiveness, or simply your presence. What feels like survival today may one day become a blessing in someone else's life. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need its message. Tell us in the comments what Micah's journey meant to you and whether you believe Sable was part of the miracle that guided the truth home. Please subscribe to Navy SEAL and K9 Stories and join us for more stories about courage, loyalty, sacrifice, faith, and the unbreakable bond between soldiers and their K9 companions. May God bless you, protect your family, strengthen you through every difficult season, and guide you safely through every battle you face. Wherever you are watching from, may you never forget that you are not alone. Your life still has purpose, and with faith, even the deepest wounds can become the beginning of healing.